Hello and welcome to episode 20 of the u3a radio podcast. Now, are you an avid reader? And if so, are you a member of a group? Later, we'll be talking to the u3a book group's advisor, who will not only give tips on how to run a group, but he'll also launch a playwriting initiative for our 40th anniversary. I'm Nick Bailey, and I'll be with you for the next 30 minutes as we go disco dancing.
We're not all great dancers, but that doesn't matter. And we all, at the moment, because there's usually about 8 or 9 of us, we all dance in a ring. We just want the handbags in the middle again.
We learn how to program a robot.
The first remote control challenge we tried was the Crazy Golf. Doesn't sound too difficult. You've only just got to steer a golf ball around a course and drop it in a hole. That's great.
And we explore Hampshire with the Havant bus pass group.
Somebody had the audacity the other day to suggest that we went down to Portsmouth on the train. I said, we don't do that. We're a bus pass group.
Another free way of travelling is to cycle. And with the Tour de France underway, it may have inspired you to get on your bike. But maybe you haven't ridden for some time and would like some advice. John Bauer from Lim and Thelwall u3a has set up the National Cycling Network, and he's been talking to Peter Clift.
Yes, the National Cycling Network is project, I suppose, to bring together all the different cycling groups within the u3as across the country to share ideas, to help u3as that haven't got cycling groups set them up, and basically share our love of cycling with everyone and anyone who wants to hear about it within the u3a.
Very good idea. The problem I think really that a lot of people have is that cycling can be a bit dangerous on the roads. Is there a way that you can separate cycle routes from car route?
It depends on your area. In quite a lot of areas, there are very good cycling infrastructure. If you're out in the country, then you tend to find that you stick quite well to quiet country lanes. But in towns and things, then there's a lot of infrastructure, particularly in the newer towns. So you start looking at the new towns like Milton Keynes, where they've actually built infrastructure. The whole idea of thinking about the cycling groups is to encourage people to learn how to cycle in the environment that they've got around them. So if it's a city environment, then thinking about how they get to quieter areas if they want to cycle on the sort of the cycle infrastructure, cycle paths, looking at various things from sustrans and the likes. But it's about sharing your experience, sharing your knowledge, and learning how to ride safely on the roads, learning how to plan your routes and plan them appropriate for your area and for your level of riding. So around my local area, we have the Transpennine Trail, which runs from coast to coast and is primarily off-road. And a lot of people like that because they can practice, they can cycle on it. The only trouble is in winter, it gets a little bit slutchy and a little bit muddy, but the roads around it are capable of being ridden most of the year, and they're usually very quiet. But again, it's having the experience and the knowledge of how to do that riding.
So I'd imagine then that it's no good if you're in u3a, for example, suddenly thinking, I'm going to do cycling, rushing out and buying your bike and then going off on a 20-mile bike ride. Things to think about first.
I was going to say, yeah, there are things to think about. Great, if you're going to go and buy a bike and do a 20-mile ride, brilliant. But think about yourself and can you manage that? Also, where are you going? Looking at the routes you're thinking of, looking at the ways that you can get there and back safely. And also, are you in a position, for example, to repair a puncture if you get one part way? You can't always phone the AA up and get them to come out and repair your bike. So it's having some basic knowledge of how to look after yourself and look after your bike before you take that step. So it's worth investing in a little bit of time if there's local options or opportunities to do basic cycle maintenance, giving them the information and a bit of basic knowledge to be able to get them home safely if they do have an incident. Plan your route in such a way that there are always shortcuts that you can take to get back home.
So a good way to start off would be, perhaps if you can, to cycle to the shops rather than taking the car.
Yes, obviously cycling to the shops, if you're going to buy something, you need something to carry it in. So again, thinking of what you're going to do. If you want panniers, fine. So yeah, it's a good idea. Cycle to the post office, cycle to the shop, cycle to anywhere that's local and is nice and easy to get to.
But a good way, if you can, is to get your local u3a to get a cycling group together, I guess, and go out on small trips together.
It is, yes. And if your u3a doesn't have a cycling group, then the National Cycling Network is the place to potentially have a look, looking for u3as within your local area that have got cycling groups. Can they help you? Can they provide you with routes? Can they support you in setting up and arranging a cycling group in your u3a? Try them out. Go and visit them a couple of times. Go and ride with them. Make sure it's something that you would like to think of in your own u3a, and use the network to gain a little bit of knowledge, a bit of experience. We're all there to help, to share our love and knowledge of cycling.
So certainly we're told that cycling is very good for our own personal health, to get out on a bike and really get some exercise going. So I guess you'd agree with that.
Yes, I do agree with it. Giving people exercise, keeping them out in the fresh air, getting them to enjoy their countryside. And it's surprising how many people, when they do get out on a cycle, don't see the roads and the local area in the same way. And the number of them who say, oh, I've been down here many times, I've never seen that, or I've never seen this. So it's a different way of viewing things as well, and just enjoying your local area.
John Bauer from the National Cycling Network. If you want a more leisurely form of travel, the Havant bus passes have it sussed as they celebrate their 10th anniversary. Leading the group since its inception is 95-year-old Ken Arkle, and he's been explaining to Joanne Watson where precisely they are based and where they venture on their Use Your Bus Pass outings.
Havant is located on the coast just to the northeast of Portsmouth and directly north of Hayling Island. So we're in effect midway between Portsmouth and Chichester. And so we've got easy access to West Sussex, to Southeast Hants, to Hayling Island and the Isle of Wight. And that roughly is our territory. I always keep it within a sensible day's travel. I had mooted the idea that we could get a bit adventurous and go somewhere and stay overnight, but so far that hasn't happened.
How many of you are there in the group, Ken?
Well, there's about just over 20, but my big dread is that one day they all turn up. For practical purposes, there's anywhere between 9 and a dozen of us who are hardened regulars.
And do you take a sort of vote on where you go, or do you have a fairly set plan every year?
Oh, we're very democratic. I decide.
Now, I know that during COVID, you actually had virtual tours. So what were you doing there?
I've got a book called Bus Pass Britain, and it's full of bus journeys that various people have done and have written an account of it. So I would look up some of these and follow them and do a little bit of research on the route and say, right, now we're leaving Ribchester over an old stone bridge, and away on the right you'll see the cathedral, that sort of thing. I've never been there in my life. We've done the journey from, for example, Newcastle to Berwick-on-Tweed. Down at the other end, we've gone from Plymouth to Torquay. Go wherever the imagination took me.
Are there many bus drivers that you recognise and they probably think, oh, blimey, it's the old bus passes are on today, you know?
No, they come in varying degrees. Some are extremely helpful. Some couldn't care less. We went on one down to Bracklesham Bay in West Sussex. It was a bit of a worry to me because I didn't know, I'd never been on that route. I didn't know how we would know when we reached the stop where we had to get out. I thought, well, the bus driver's bound to advise us. Oh, he said, I don't know about that. I said, don't you know the name of any of the stops? No, he said, no, and he couldn't care less. But we were fortunate in as much there was an elderly lady taking a great interest in the proceedings. And she said, don't worry. She said, when I get out, your slot will be the next one. So all went well. We had a good lunch and we went up onto the beach at Bracklesham Bay, and there in the distance was the Isle of Wight. The rollers were coming in and there was a little mini lifeboat station there. So it was an interesting trip.
I was looking on your website and you have certain recollections of previous tours. And I noticed there was one to Tangmere Aviation Museum that one of your members said they were very disappointed by the soggy sausage rolls.
That was me. They didn't call it a cafe or a restaurant. They called it the Naffy. And they were on the menu was giant sausage roll. Lovely. And of course, they microwaved it rather than a conventional oven. But that was a very interesting trip because I used to be what in the Navy they called a telegraphist, a radio operator. And one of our other members was a radio operator in the RAF. So we had great fun playing with the Morse keys. But one of the wags called us the Meals on Wheels group. Before this, I don't think I ever used my bus pass. I think that's the same as some of our members. But now we are all hardened bus travellers. Somebody had the audacity the other day to suggest that we went down to Portsmouth on the train. I said, we don't do that. We're a bus pass group.
All your trips seem to be very well planned in advance. Have you not ever thought, oh, we'll just turn up at the bus station and go on a magical mystery tour, take the first bus that comes along?
Actually, we have a member who does just that. The trouble is, you see, at Havant bus station, there's an awful lot of routes go out of it. By the time we'd argued and decided which one to get on, they'd have gone.
So do you have a very modern bus fleet down in Havant? Are they a real pleasure to travel on?
The buses on what they call the coastliner route, which runs from Portsmouth along to Littlehampton, they are quite good. They're double deckers. On the other hand, some of the Solent buses are a bit of a bone shaker. When we go over to the Isle of Wight, there's a circular bus that goes from Ryde up through Shanklin, Sandown, Ventnor, and then back to Newport. We know that we've got to go up top and sit on the pavement side, because as you leave Shanklin, you climb up round to Bombchurch Down and you get these magnificent views over Sandown Bay. And equally, if we're going up to Midhurst from Chichester, we know we must sit up top near the front, because as you come up out of the urban area, a whole panorama of the South Downs opens up in front of you. Wonderful views. And the countryside from the top of the double-decker bus opens up a new horizon, because you can see over the hedges and see things that you wouldn't see in a car or a single-decker.
Ken Arkle, who at 95 must be one of the oldest group leaders around. If you know of someone even older running a group, let us know through communications@u3a.org.uk. If you've still got some energy after your exploration, how about a trip to the disco? Tricia Barclay from Ashbourne u3a has set up a disco dancing group, and Val Dawson asked how she got involved.
Well, I have got to the stage now where all our friends' children are married and our children are married, and so we're not invited to any weddings, so we never actually get out to discos. We don't go to nightclubs because we're far too old for that sort of thing. And it suddenly dawned on me that if I'm not careful, I wasn't going to be able to dance anymore. So I wanted to dance. I love dancing. My mum used to call it jigging. And so I thought, well, how about if we had a monthly club where people could just go and dance? Now, the biggest problem with that is that to do that, I would need to get some music. And I was umming and ahhing about how to do that. But I have a very good friend who is a DJ. Yes. And
useful.
Yes, we went out for a meal with him and his wife, and started talking about the fact that I would like to do this.
And is he a mature gentleman?
He's the same age as me, yes.
Oh, right.
Yes, so very mature, yes. And he still works, which is why the disco's at night. But he's very happy to do it, because although he did do an awful lot of DJing, he's now gone on to swimming announcements, etc. So he goes to big events for the swimming world, and so he doesn't get very often. He doesn't get to do the discoing that he wants to do. So I was talking to him about it and said, it's all very well, but I really can't afford you because it's quite expensive at DJs. And he said, no, I'll do it free. So we decided to. I put an article in the Ashbourne u3a newsletter and said, is anybody interested? Because I thought, if nobody's interested, there's no point. But I thought it was worth asking if there's anybody out there, and I got quite a good response. And the rent for Wyeston Hall is not huge, so as long as I got probably 8 or 9 there, then I was covering the hall rent and the petrol for Tom.
You do charge a small amount, do you?
I charge a £5.
That's good.
And what I say to people is it's £5 to cover the rent, etc. And then if they want to bring their own drink and eats or whatever, they can do. And some people bring a bottle of wine and have wine. Some people just come to listen to the music, and they'll bring some nibbles and some drinks and just enjoy the music. Others basically dance the whole time, and they've probably just got water and that's it. So yeah, that's how we started off, and there was a good enough response, and then I applied, of course, to the committee and said, is this okay? And they said, yeah, brilliant idea. But don't ask us.
So it's going from strength to strength at the moment, then,
it was going very well. We had about 8 or 9 at the first one. In March, I think it was, we had about 18, and that was really great. And I think I just caught it when everybody was at home, because since then people have said, yes, I'm really interested, but I'm away. And so we've actually had different people come and go because people are away at weekends or whatever. If they all came at once, I've got about 23 on the books, but they don't all come at once.
So when's your next disco night coming up then?
Next disco night, because we're stopped for the summer, is the 30th of September.
Right.
It's always, I'm trying to put it for the last Friday in the month. And the 30th of September, everyone hopefully will be back from their holidays.
And you won't yet know what type of music will be played?
No idea.
It's all a big surprise.
All big surprise. It can vary from rock and roll to I don't know, everything under the sun. We don't do a lot of 50s, but we do a lot of 60s, 70s, 80s,
Beatles,
and 90s.
I hope.
We do the Beatles. Yeah, we did the Hollies. We've done it's tremendous. We don't tend to do the 20s onwards, the 2000s, because basically it's not really proper, in my mind, proper dance music. I'm sure it is in my grandchildren's or my children's idea, but not mine.
It's too loud.
It is, yes. And it's too samey for me. Oh, I sound like my mother now. But yes, so it's basically 60s, 70s, 80s and 90s. And it's a good mixture. And because we're all different ages as well, people can remember music that other people have forgotten about. And then it'll click something off. And so you'll have one record, and then all of a sudden you'll think, oh, what about such and such? My favourite, you see, I'm into things like Tiger Feet and The Sweet and all that sort of thing. So I'll do all that as well as Tamla Motown. But then other people will come up, and it's the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, and it's great to have that mixture.
It's nostalgic. It's nostalgic anyway, isn't it? But I mean, it's great fun to keep moving and keep going.
Yeah, that's something we said at the last meeting, was that we're dancing, but actually it's memories.
The dancing queen, Tricia Barclay. Some disco dance moves can be quite robotic, but have you ever thought of building your own robot? If so, Keith Bostock from Gloucester District u3a is the man to speak to. He's the group leader of the u3a's electronics group, and in October there is to be a u3a Robot Constructors Challenge. Ella Watts asked Keith if there was a historical timeline to this event.
There is. I mean, robots have been around for a long time, but within u3a, Cannock Chase u3a very bravely came up with an idea of building a robot and getting this robot to undertake various challenges. And so they informed regional representatives, and we heard about it in January 2019. And they ran this through, and they had been busy building arenas and deciding on what the challenges would be. And we thought about this as an electronics group and thought, well, this is interesting. We had just finished one of our projects, which was a TV simulator, which we ran via a Raspberry Pi microcomputer using Python coding. And a robot would suit the Raspberry Pi and the Python coding, and all we have to do is attach various bits and pieces. Well, that's what we thought anyway. It was a lot more complicated than that, and we had to use a lot more brain power than we anticipated. But Challenge Day came along. We'd spent about 9 months working it out, and we then pitted ourselves against other u3as from around the country. We had a team from Devon, a team from North London, Grantham, and ourselves from Gloucester, and Cheltenham. So we got a reasonable representation, but not enough people. And that's really where we wanted to get to. If we had been allowed to continue, and if COVID hadn't come along, we were hoping to run this in maybe 2020. But as it is, we're going to attempt to run it in 2022, in October.
So what happens on the actual challenge day?
In 2022, we have decided to add some complications to it. So we've added some gaps in the line to just make it difficult. And we've added an intersection. So you've actually one line crosses over the other. And you've got to keep going straight on. So that's what we've done for 2022. And we had that working, and that was great. And we thought, yes, we're done. But we'd done that by about the end of May, and we were thinking, should we go on for another challenge, or should we just rest on our laurels and leave it there? And we thought, no, we'll be brave. We'll go on and do something that's remote controlled. And the first remote controlled challenge we tried was the Crazy Golf. Doesn't sound too difficult. You've only just got to steer a golf ball around a course and drop it in a hole. That's great. But then when you're going up over a ramp, a curved ramp at that, how do you actually keep the ball in place? And then when you're going down the other side of the ramp, how do you stop the ball from running away? So we had to fit what we called a gate to capture the golf ball and to be able to maneuver it around the course, remote controlled. One that gave us a bit more of a technical problem was an egg and spoon race. And that is, as it says, an egg and spoon. So you've got to mount the spoon onto the chassis. That in turn means that your chassis is likely to topple over. So there's a lot of engineering involved there. We had to put additional bits and pieces on to the attachment to get it stable. You then have something to tilt the spoon so that you can roll the ball off into the hole. And we had fun doing that one.
So what is the future for this event then, Keith?
Well, at the moment, we're still quite small. We're sort of still we've actually seem to have reduced our catchment area at the moment. Now, that might be because of the fuel prices. But at the moment, we've sort of got teams from the Midlands, West Midlands, and we've got ourselves in Cheltenham and hopefully Grantham. We don't have any London teams at the moment, but there's still a little bit of time to enter. We would like to have 16 teams competing, 16 robots. If we have more than that, then in future years, depending on who's going to organise it, we would eventually end up at regional events, and then the first two from a regional event could then come to a national event, and that would be the nice way of doing it. That would be the succession. But it's like everything, it's having the time to be able to do the engineering, to be able to do the coding. There is no easy fix to that. You need time and a certain amount of money to invest in your robot.
Well, it sounds fascinating, Keith. So I'm sure it will go on from strength to strength. I'll have to come and have a look at this. Maybe I'll try a slice of your raspberry pie. How about that?
Well, I'm afraid the raspberry pie is very crunchy at the moment.
Keith Bostock, the group leader of the u3a electronics group. And if you'd like to join the challenge, you can get in touch with Keith through the Gloucester District u3a website. I could do with a robot to sort out my books, of which I'm sure I have far too many. Pretty well all u3as have a book group, which became even more popular during lockdown through Zoom. The book group's advisor for the National Association is Richard Peoples, the chair of Edinburgh u3a. Sarah Goodall asked him how he became involved.
Well, I started by talking to the trust about my interest in reading groups and playwriting groups, which are two of my interests, and about literature in general. And they asked me if I'd be interested in being a subject advisor. There already was one for play reading and for creative writing. So after some conversation about different types of literature which interest me, I agreed that I could become the subject advisor for book groups, because there wasn't one at the time. So I've been doing that now for at least a year, I think, something like that.
It's probably safe to say that book groups are the most prevalent group within the National u3a. I for example, very, very popular subject. You must get inundated with questions. What are people asking you?
Things like making sure that you have a clear policy of what kind of books you read, which can vary. Some book groups are very broad and will read any kind of fiction. Some will read even fiction and non-fiction. Some will tend to read just contemporary fiction. Some will read classics and so on. And then there are other guidelines that I would give them. I mean, obvious ones really, like try to be democratic so that everybody gets a chance to choose books and everybody gets a chance to talk about books. I think those are the two main ones. People sometimes ask about scoring systems, because some book groups score the books they read at 1 out of 10. And so, some of them even have quite elaborate systems where they score different aspects of a book. That's not very common, but some of the groups that do that think it's quite useful. Ooh. So it gives them an idea of which books were most successful and therefore which ones they should go for in the future.
Oh my goodness, what a nerve. I understand that you're well placed for this role, Richard, because you were an adult teacher. You were involved with the Open University. Tell me about that.
Yes, I became an associate lecturer for the Open University while I was still working full-time in another capacity. And then eventually, after 18 years or so, I ended up working for them full-time. But I taught people, adults obviously, and I taught a general arts course and also a popular culture course. And part of that was reading novels and plays and poetry, which was my main interest. I joined the Open University some years after I'd been to a conventional university and not finished my degree. I was probably too immature, too interested in other things like drama and journalism and student politics. So years later, after I'd been married and had children and all the rest, I started an Open University degree. And I got a good degree. And then somebody asked me if I was interested in teaching for the OU. So I went for an interview, and much to my amazement, I got the job.
Tell me more about play reading and playwriting groups that you set up, Richard.
Yes, I've run play reading groups for some years and continued doing that when I moved to Edinburgh. We would read all kinds of plays. I started off reading, having a play reading group where we just read extracts of plays all the way from the ancient Greeks all the way through to modern plays. And then we changed to reading whole plays, so it took a bit longer. But the thing I did, unlike many play reading groups, we didn't just read the plays. We read and we stopped every few pages to discuss them. to discuss what was happening in the plays. And this proved to be quite a successful formula, so I carried on with it when I came to Edinburgh. But my other interest, having been involved as an actor and then director and then more recently a playwright, I started playwriting groups as well. And I'd also been doing that for many years. So therefore I had a body of knowledge that I'd collected, ideas about playwriting and so on. So I ran not a group, but a course. It started during the lockdowns, and in Scotland, we started a thing called u3a online across Scotland, which was a way for people to continue with activities while lockdowns were going on. So we had potential playwrights, most of them who hadn't ever written a play before, from all over Scotland taking part in this course.
You've got a project coming up which you will be sharing with all members of the u3a.
Yes, and this is playwriting again. I took part in a project run by the University of Stirling called Reimagining the Future in Older Age, which was about positive futures for older people. And that triggered some thoughts in my head about creating some drama. And I had this title of 1 Foot in the Future, which obviously is a nod to 1 Foot in the Grave, and trying to make the point that older people can think about the future, not just the past. So to cut a long story short, there are a group of us in Edinburgh have been writing a play which will be performed at the Scottish Storytelling Centre, which is in the Edinburgh Royal Mile, in September. And then we're also making a video, and that video will be made available to all u3as throughout the UK and will be part of the 40th anniversary of u3a.
Sounds like an ambitious project, and we look forward to seeing the video. Richard Peoples, the book group's advisor for the National u3a. And if you'd like more information on subject advisors and subject networks, just go to our website at u3a.org.uk/learning. I must say that after the cycling and disco dancing earlier in the programme, I could settle down with a good book. But before I do that, let me remind you that if you've got any interesting stories you'd like to share, maybe an adventure you've recently undertaken, or an ambition realised late in life, we'd love to hear from you. Let us know through communications@u3a.org.uk. My thanks to Ella, Peter, Joanne, Val and Sarah for the interviews, and also to Ella for producing the podcast. Until next time, this is Nick Bailey saying goodbye.